So what kind of questions do you commonly hear from students when they come to you for career counseling?
That's a good one. The most common one that I use to kind of diagnose or assess where a person's at is how clear are they even in their question, right? And so kind of running a gamut here, I'm going to give you three slices of the pie. Probably the most common way that students sit down in my office and I'll ask them, so what brings you my way today? Or, what prompted the visit? If they say something like, I have no clue what I'm doing here, I'm going to believe the student. And that tells me they're truly just floating along. And they're probably here just out of a sense of faith and hope that, I know. And usually when I question them a little further, they'll say, well, I know school's important, right? Mm-hmm. And then they get real practical. They'll talk about, well, no, I'm at Pierce because it's cheaper than PLU or going to Wazoo or whatever. That's true. And then the other thing that's common is they choose Pierce because it's in their backyard. It's close, right? So there's very practical reasons, but it goes back to that's kind of the level of commitment or the level of awareness they have. So that'll tend to reinforce their opening line with that was, I don't know why I'm here. Mm-hmm. Well, if that's the case, then the first place we need to start is really starting to give them some structure on how I do career counseling with people and to show them kind of the interlocking steps that I use. So what it does is it sets them a bit at peace because then they can know there's actually a way Bret's going to handle this, and he's providing structure so I can just kind of, I'm going to play my position and do what he asked me to do, but I also am not going to fret and try and figure it all out on my own, and what a relief that is that they know they've got support. Then the second kind of medium is they'll say, well, typically they might even start off with, I don't know what I want to be when I grow up or what I'm doing here. And when I sense that maybe there's actually more, they've given it more thought, then I'll just kind of flip it back to them and say, so tell me more. You indicated once before that you have loved animals since you were a little girl, They'll divulge something like that, well, I thought I wanted to be and they'll say that. They'll say something to me. Well, if they give me something like that, then I'm going to ask them just to go deeper as to, well, what was that about for you? What's making you rethink it? What are the things are you scared about it? What are the things like that? Like a couple of weeks ago, I actually had a young lady come in, and this is no lie, it's a true story. She came in, she sat down, and she started talking to me about doing her career plan. And I was like, okay, very cool. What were you thinking? She goes, well, since I was a little girl, I always wanted to be a nurse. I thought, well, it's perfect. We have a great nursing program. We have 2 different versions, and then we got into a little more discussion about how she loves to help people, and she had a grandmother who got very sick, and so she was around nurses. And sometimes that's kind of a given that they idolize a particular profession because it was significant in their life at one point. And so certainly this was true for her, and she was talking about it. And then right in the middle of a sentence, she just kind of stopped and she leans back like this, and her face kind of goes pale. And I thought, oh my God, I've finally done it. I've killed a student right in a session. I've been around a long time. I've never had that happen. So she leans back and she says to me, she goes, but you know what, Bret? The honest reason I'm rethinking is because I can't stand the sight of blood and I hate needles. Well, we've got an issue, right? It's kind of like wanting to be a pilot and you're afraid of heights. It's not going to work out real well. So there's an example where she had this fantasy, but she had finally gotten to the point where she could get really honest with herself about, here are some things that I know are true about me that are not going to be a match to theirs. So now that student, what they need some structure too. But the very first thing that I work there, or I address there, is to say, well, number one is I really affirm the fact that they got honest about it. And you can almost see them, they just feel a relief in saying it out loud to somebody. And then the second thing I'll do to move towards that, or start moving in a direction of some of the structure again, is to explore some other ideas that they may or may not have had. Because what I find is as people start talking about what they do know, they also start building like a confidence in themselves. And it affirms that they can trust themselves to know something. Because she just divulged something that was kind of scary for her to say. Mm-hmm. But over here now, it's like, okay, so that's cool. We've acknowledged that. Now let's pivot and start to see what resources you do have in terms of awareness and that. And then the third group is actually, these are folks that they're just needing some straight up information. They don't really need to do too much of that inward journey that I was sharing with you earlier. They really don't need to. What they need is they need a little more information, or they need to know where they can get reliable information, like the young man I was talking to you about today before lunch. He has really started to claim that he wants to become a teacher, an elementary school teacher. And also the fact he's male, that's a big deal. So one of the things he and I talked about is helping him make the connection so he can go out and do more informational interviewing. And what that is about is it's talking to people who are doing things that you think you'd like to do or that you are attracted to, and finding out more about their path, how they got where they are, what they love about the work, what they don't like about the work, what are challenges in that particular profession. And the other big thing is they start finding out about resources in different avenues where you could get more experience in that field. So it's really a wonderful way of kind of, if you will, trying on the shoes before you buy them, you know, and getting a feel for, is this a match for me? Is this something I want to pursue? And that's where this young man was at by the time we were done with our hour session. He realized, no, the more I talk to you, the more it's like, I know I want to really check this out. So then I start to talk to him about more the nuts and bolts of confirming and exploring what he's looking at. And notice, like some of the variables I just gave you, notice how that's really different than job shadowing.
Yeah.
You know, some people confuse one for the other. They're separate things. You know, job shadowing is really fine when you've done a lot of the already inward work and you know. So it's kind of like mildly dating then you just start hanging out and see what it's like. But you've done all the inner reflection already. And so when you go to do your comparison, you have something to compare it to. But oftentimes the way job shadowing is used is just throwing people into an experience, and they have no criteria to compare the experience to. So then they'll report, well, I did my job shadowing, but it really didn't help. Well, yeah, because you weren't ready for it. And that's not necessarily their fault, but it is a lack. And that's what I said earlier about, my goal is always to help people get clear. So you got to use techniques and tools at the right time and understand what the agenda is of that student or that client. And then it's up to me as the pro to know, okay, this is probably a better fit than this right now. Yeah.